June 20th, 1935, Greenville, Texas. The afternoon heat hovers above the cracked soil as a thin boy shoulders a rifle taller than himself. His hands shake from exhaustion, not fear. He exhales, steadies the barrel, and fires. A single shot echoes across the empty field. A rabbit falls 20 yards away. Dinner for 12 mouths. That's how Audie Murphy learned precision, not on a rifle range, but in the ruins of the Great Depression. By 1935, Texas had one of the highest unemployment rates in the nation, over 25%. The soil had failed, the crops gone to dust. Murphy's father left when Audie was 16, one more casualty of the era's quiet collapse. Audie left school in 5th grade. He worked cotton fields, hauled wood, and hunted to keep his younger siblings alive. He weighed barely 100 pounds. The average American infantryman of 1941 weighed 160. The army would later call him underweight, underage, and unfit. The numbers didn't change. He did. December 7th, 1941. The radio in Hunt County crackled with news from Hawaii, Pearl Harbor under attack. Within 24 hours, recruiters across Texas were overwhelmed. Murphy walked 11 miles to the nearest station. The Marine sergeant looked at his birth certificate and laughed. "Come back when you're 16, son." The Navy turned him down next, then the paratroopers, the Air Corps. The Army clerk wrote "underweight" in red ink. He tried again 2 weeks later, falsifying his birth date and eating candy bars before weigh-in. The scale barely moved. He weighed 112 pounds. It was enough. The war needed bodies more than rules. He enlisted in June 1942, age 17 on paper, 16 in truth. Infantry, 15th Regiment, 3rd Division. The uniform hung loose on his frame. The boots blistered his feet within hours. But he passed every marksmanship test with uncanny precision. The instructor at Camp Walters, watching through binoculars, noted that Murphy fired slow and calm, like a man who doesn't waste bullets. He wasn't impressed by medals or rhetoric. He just hit the target every time. Training consumed 12 weeks, field stripping the M1 Garand blindfolded, forced marches under Texas heat, bayonet drills that replaced hesitation with muscle memory. The Army's data showed a 35% dropout rate among new recruits that summer. Murphy never missed a day. When asked why he never complained, he answered once, quietly, "You can't complain to hunger." The line was never recorded in any report, but his sergeant repeated it years later in an interview. It summed up Murphy's method: endurance through necessity. By September 1942, his unit shipped to North Africa. Murphy had never seen the ocean. He stood at the railing of the transport ship and stared for hours, saying nothing. The men around him smoked, joked, gambled. He just watched the horizon. The Army listed him as 5'5", 115 pounds, the smallest man in his platoon. But within months, he would be the most efficient. His habit of counting shots, conserving rounds, and adjusting for wind was already noticed by his commanding officer. Efficiency wasn't bravery. It was survival mathematics. Statistically, 1 in every 4 infantrymen deployed to Europe in 1943 would die or be wounded before the war's end. Murphy didn't know that number. He didn't need to. He had spent half his life fighting starvation, distance, and failure. War was just a change of weapon, not of purpose. When the convoy reached Casablanca, the heat felt familiar. The orders were simple. Follow Patton's drive north, through Sicily and Italy. On the last night before landing, Murphy sat cleaning his rifle under red light. The ship rocked. The air reeked of oil and sweat. A corporal beside him whispered, "You scared, Tex?" Murphy didn't look up. "Not if I shoot first." The line wasn't bravado, it was calculation. He wrote one letter home that week to his younger sister. It was 4 sentences long. The last line read, "Tell the boys not to quit school, and don't worry if I don't come back. I'm busy." The next morning he stepped off the landing craft into his first combat zone. Sunlight hit the water. Machine guns opened from the cliffs. The boy from Texas lowered his head and walked forward. He wasn't supposed to be there, but neither was hunger, nor war. Both had already chosen him. He wasn't born a soldier. The hunger drafted him first. July 10th, 1943. Off the southern coast of Sicily, the Mediterranean churns beneath grey skies. Landing Craft Infantry No. 192 moves with the tide, one among hundreds pushing toward the beaches near Licata. Inside, Private Audie Murphy grips his M1 rifle. Salt spray stings his eyes. Around him, 30 men from the 15th Infantry Regiment wait in silence. The engines drown out everything: fear, prayer, and the sound of the distant bombardment. The ramp drops. Gunfire answers. Operation Husky involved 160,000 Allied troops, one of the largest amphibious invasions of the war. The U.S. 3rd Infantry Division, led by Major General Lucien Truscott, spearheaded the landings under General Patton's command. The data that morning was cold and precise. German and Italian defences expected to hold for at least 72 hours. Estimated casualties for the first day exceeded 2,000. In reality, confusion caused more chaos than resistance. Murphy stepped into water waist deep, boots heavy with sand and seawater, rifle held high above his head. The LCVP behind him exploded. 6 men never surfaced. He reached shore by crawling, 1 meter at a time. Bullets cut the sand like hail. The first time he fired, he didn't feel the recoil. He fired again. The third shot hit. The man fell. It was over in less than a second. There was no time to process the image. Training had done its job. He advanced with the others, clearing a small ridge overlooking the beach. By noon, the regiment secured the sector. The sun was already brutal, reaching 38 degrees Celsius. They dug shallow holes in dry earth that offered no cover. Murphy drank from his canteen once every hour, as instructed. By evening, his company had lost 19 men. The rest were already veterans. Combat reports from that week list Murphy as steady under fire. His squad leader wrote, "He doesn't panic, he moves small." The phrase meant he minimized his profile, economy of motion under fire, a habit learned from hunting rabbits in tall grass. He didn't shoot to kill faster, he shot to survive longer. His unit advanced inland toward Canicattì, facing pockets of resistance from Italian Bersaglieri troops. The terrain favored the defenders: rocky hills, vineyards, and dry stone walls. During one skirmish, a German machine gun pinned down the platoon. 2 soldiers tried to flank and were cut down immediately. Murphy crawled forward 20 yards, using small bursts from his rifle. 3 shots, then silence. When the men reached the position, both gunners were dead. He said nothing. He just cleaned the rifle bolt with a strip of cloth. That night, Murphy fell asleep sitting against a rock. The heat never left. He wrote another letter home. "Sicily is rough country. People look hungry here too." He enclosed a $5 bill, most of his pay. By the end of the campaign, the 3rd Infantry Division had advanced nearly 250 kilometers in 38 days, with over 2,300 casualties. Murphy was promoted to corporal, a decision based not on rank structure, but on consistency. His accuracy in engagements was logged at over 70% confirmed hits per round fired. He carried his weapon at all times, even while eating or sleeping. His rations were usually half finished, the rest traded for extra ammunition. In August, during the push toward Messina, his platoon was ambushed by German paratroopers. The firefight lasted 20 minutes. Afterward, the squad leader found Murphy reloading calmly beside a knocked-out half-track. "We're clear," Murphy said, eyes fixed forward. The sergeant nodded. The younger men stared, not at his composure, but at the emptiness behind it. When Sicily fell, the division rested near Palermo. The Allied press called it a clean campaign. The casualty lists disagreed. Murphy's name wasn't on them. He had survived his first fire, not through strength, but through precision and silence. He didn't win the battle. He just refused to lose his first one. February 2nd, 1944. The Anzio beachhead. Rain falls in thick, cold sheets. The mud is knee-deep, sucking at every step. Corporal Audie Murphy, now 19, crouches in a slit trench just wide enough for his shoulders. The world around him is a grid of exhaustion, shattered vehicles, collapsed tents, bodies under tarps. The front hasn't moved in weeks. Above the line, German artillery fires with metronomic precision. Every 20 seconds, another round lands. The 3rd Infantry Division had been ashore since late January. Their objective was clear: break through to Rome. The numbers told a different story. 60,000 Allied troops pinned down by over 100,000 German defenders under Field Marshal Kesselring. The beachhead was flat, exposed, and shrinking by the day. Every tree became a marker for artillery calibration. Within the first month, over 7,000 Americans were dead or wounded. Statistically, an infantryman's life expectancy under bombardment here was 17 days. Murphy had already doubled it. He recorded time differently, by counting shell impacts. He learned to estimate distance by sound delay, to predict barrages by rhythm. His squad called it Murphy's clock. It wasn't superstition, it was pattern recognition. He could tell when to move, when to freeze, and when to sleep. At night, he wrote brief notes in a pocket notebook. Rained again, one wounded, dug new hole. No emotion, just data. It was how he stayed sane. By February 20th, the Germans had launched 7 counterattacks. The Americans responded with equal desperation. The 15th Infantry held a 600-yard sector near Cisterna, a name that would soon mean attrition. Murphy's platoon lost 60% of its men in 2 weeks. The replacements were younger and slower. He trained them by repetition, weapon cleaning, magazine swaps, sight alignment. He insisted on it between attacks. When one private complained, Murphy just said, "The gun is your only friend here, keep it clean." His efficiency brought promotion to sergeant. He accepted it without comment. His commanders noted, high composure under prolonged duress. What the report didn't say was that Murphy had stopped speaking much at all. Sleep came in fragments, 15 minutes at a time between barrages. Rations were mouldy. Water came from shell craters. Medical evacuation lines often failed under sniper fire. In March, trench foot spread through the division. He wrapped his feet in dry rags scavenged from dead uniforms. The Anzio stalemate dragged on for 4 months. 63 days of bombardment, followed by short bursts of terror. When the German tanks came on March 29th, Murphy fired from behind a wrecked truck until his rifle barrel glowed red. A lieutenant later wrote, "Murphy acts like he's solving a problem, not fighting a war." It was true. He counted rounds, adjusted for wind, and conserved motion. Even under chaos, he behaved like a machine tuned by survival. When Allied forces finally broke through toward Rome in late May, the 3rd Division's casualty rate had reached 44%. Murphy was still alive, now thin to the point of frailty. He had malaria twice, shrapnel wounds in his legs, and 1 minor concussion. None of it reached his medical file. He refused evacuation. "I can walk, save the stretcher." The line became routine. The army data from Anzio later confirmed what soldiers already knew. Artillery caused 70% of all casualties. Most men died without seeing their enemy. Murphy was one of the few who adapted to that invisible war. He survived by pattern, by timing, by refusal to move when instinct said run. When the Allies marched into Rome on June 4th, Murphy didn't celebrate. He cleaned his rifle, counted his ammunition, and sat quietly against a wall. He was 20 years old, already carrying 6 campaign ribbons and a 1,000-yard stare. He learned that surviving wasn't luck, it was calculation. January 26, 1945. Holtzwihr, eastern France. Snow falls through smoke and artillery haze. Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy stands at the edge of a forest clearing, staring at a field that has already consumed a dozen men. His unit, Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, has been ordered to hold the line. German armour is massing in the woods ahead. The nearest reinforcements are 2 miles behind. Murphy looks over his shoulder. 40 men remain. Most are wounded or frostbitten. By that winter, the Wehrmacht had lost most of its tanks, yet its counterattacks in Alsace were still methodical. Intelligence estimated 1 enemy battalion in the sector, roughly 250 men, with 6 Panzer IVs. Murphy's company had 1 tank destroyer left, an M10, half buried in mud, its crew waiting for orders. Communications were unreliable. Snow had coated every antenna in ice. The division log recorded the temperature at -9 degrees Celsius. Visibility, 200 meters. At 1400 hours, the Germans advanced. Machine guns, mortars, armor. The line broke on the left flank within minutes. Murphy ordered his men to fall back to the tree line and cover. He stayed forward with a field phone and a single 50 caliber machine gun mounted on the disabled M10. Flames licked the hull where fuel had ignited under shrapnel. His boots sank into slush mixed with blood and gasoline. He radioed artillery coordinates, then lifted the weapon and fired. For nearly an hour, he held position alone. The weapon overheated twice. He changed belts mechanically, counting the bursts, 5 seconds on, 3 off. Artillery shells landed within 50 yards of his position. His call to headquarters was calm. "They're coming through. Adjust fire, 40 left. Over the radio, an operator asked for confirmation that he was still alive. His answer? I'm fine, keep sending shells. By 1500, German infantry had reached within 30 meters of his line. Murphy's rounds cut through them. The air reeked of burned oil and cordite. The M10 finally exploded behind him, knocking him flat. He rose, bleeding from his leg, and resumed firing. Witnesses later counted over 50 enemy bodies in front of his position. When he ran out of ammunition, he limped back through the smoke and began reorganizing his platoon. The Germans withdrew. It took 2 days to tally the losses. Company B had 19 men left standing. Murphy refused evacuation again. His field jacket was burned through, his left leg swollen with shrapnel. The regimental surgeon wrote, he shouldn't be walking. Murphy ignored him and filed his after-action report that night. It was 3 sentences long. The last read, "We held." The official citation for his Medal of Honor described extraordinary heroism and leadership under fire. It didn't mention the burn scars or the ringing in his ears that never stopped. His commander tried to explain it later in an interview. He wasn't brave in the way you think. He was efficient. He just never stopped doing the next thing. When news of the award reached headquarters, someone asked to fly him back for ceremonies. Murphy refused. Not until the line's quiet. The division stayed in combat for another month. Statistically, he had now spent more time in active engagement than any living American infantryman. 400 days under fire. His kill count was never published officially, but estimates exceeded 240 confirmed enemy casualties. He dismissed all of it. Numbers were abstractions. What mattered were the faces of the men who didn't return. After Holtzwir, command insisted he rest. He didn't. He walked the perimeter every night, checking sentries, memorizing artillery grids. A war correspondent who visited called him a ghost in uniform. He slept 2 hours a night. When asked why he kept going, he said simply, someone has to. When spring came, snow melted into mud, revealing the charred wreckage of the M10 still half buried in the field. The men avoided it. Murphy didn't. He stood there once, silently, before walking away without a word. For 1 hour, a single soldier equaled a company. August 15th, 1945. San Antonio, Texas. The parade crowds roar as confetti drifts over returning troops. Bands play, flags wave, and the headlines read, "Victory in Japan." In the middle of the street, a small man in a pressed uniform watches in silence. Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy, 21 years old, 5 feet 5 inches, 112 pounds, America's most decorated soldier. 33 medals, including the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, and 2 Silver Stars. The newspapers call him the one-man army. He doesn't smile. The war ended, but his body still behaved like it hadn't. His weight had dropped to under 110 pounds. He flinched at every engine backfire. He slept in fragments, waking with his hands clenched around an invisible rifle. At the height of his fame, the Veterans Administration reported that 44% of returning infantrymen showed severe adjustment difficulties. The term post-traumatic stress disorder didn't exist yet. The files listed his condition as battle fatigue. The symptoms were the same: insomnia, nightmares, isolation, hypervigilance. Hollywood came next. James Cagney saw Murphy's photo in Life magazine and invited him to California. The studios wanted a hero, not a patient. By 1949, Murphy had appeared in his first Western, Bad Boy. He was soft-spoken, awkward on camera, but precise in every take. Reporters asked what it felt like to be a legend. He said, "I just did my job." When the applause stopped, he went home, drew the curtains, and slept with a .45 under his pillow. The statistics followed him. Between 1946 and 1950, over 4.5 million veterans returned to civilian life. Suicide rates among them rose 30% above the national average. Murphy spoke publicly once about it, in a quiet radio interview. "It's not the noise that gets you, it's the silence." He spent nights at a racetrack he co-owned, pacing the stables when insomnia set in. The smell of gunpowder still triggered flashbacks. He refused to go hunting again. "I've killed enough," he told a friend. In 1955, he portrayed himself in To Hell and Back, based on his wartime memoir. The movie grossed over $8 million, the highest-earning war film in Universal's history at the time. Viewers saw explosions, heroism, medals. Murphy saw ghosts. He watched the film premiere in silence, walked out halfway through, and didn't return. Later that year, he moved into a small house in the San Fernando Valley. He covered the windows with tinfoil to block reflections. He tried marriage, twice. Both times the same pattern: restlessness, long drives, silence. Friends described him as disciplined to the point of emptiness. He took sleeping pills in increasing doses. Once, after a nightmare, he fired a pistol into the ceiling. No one was hurt. He apologized the next morning and went back to work. The army had discharged him officially in September 1945. He never cashed most of his service pay. When asked why, he said, "You don't charge money for breathing." In the late 1950s, he began speaking to veterans groups, advocating for mental health support, a cause the government largely ignored. Congressional hearings on combat trauma wouldn't begin until the 1970s. Murphy's speeches were short and factual. "We train men to fight," he said. "We don't train them to stop." Despite public admiration, he avoided large gatherings. He refused to appear in uniform again. The decorations sat in a box under his bed. He sometimes opened it, checked that all ribbons were still there, and closed it again. In interviews, he looked detached, almost analytical. When a journalist asked what courage meant to him, he replied, "Being scared and doing it anyway." By 1959, he was 34, with 20 movies behind him and more nightmares than roles. His face remained boyish, but his eyes belonged to an old man. A medical report from the period listed severe chronic anxiety, secondary to combat exposure. The doctor's note ended with, "Patient exhibits remarkable self-control." Audie Murphy never spoke about his Medal of Honor. He never reenacted the Holtzfir battle publicly. When veterans asked for advice, he said, "Sleep when you can. Clean your weapon. Don't think too much." It was the same logic that kept him alive in Europe, now applied to survival at home. He survived peace the same way he survived war, by instinct. May 28, 1971, Catawba, Virginia. The morning fog hangs low over the Blue Ridge Mountains. A twin-engine Aero Commander disappears from radar at 11:49 a.m. No distress call, no signal. 6 men on board. One of them is Audie Murphy, 45 years old, farmer, actor, veteran. The wreckage is found 2 days later on a wooded slope. The fuselage burned, the metal twisted. No survivors. The official report lists pilot error and poor weather visibility. The data is clinical: altitude, bearing, engine output. No mention of who he was or what he carried beyond that flight plan. By then, most Americans recognized his face from films, not battlefields. To a younger generation, he was another Hollywood figure, not the soldier who once fought entire platoons alone. The funeral took place at Arlington National Cemetery on June 7th. Over 2,000 veterans attended in silence. No cameras were allowed beyond the gate. The Army Honor Guard folded the flag with practiced precision. 13 folds, 3 volleys, 1 bugle. The sound of taps echoed over Section 46. The inscription on the headstone was plain: Audie L. Murphy, Texas, 2nd Lieutenant, U.S. Army, World War II, Medal of Honor. Nothing else. In the decades that followed, his record remained unmatched. 33 decorations, 400 days of frontline combat, no failed mission. Statistically, he represented less than 1/100% of all US soldiers who served, the anomaly that defied probability. Yet his greatest contribution came after death. His advocacy for mental health reform, ignored during his life, resurfaced in the late 1970s as the Department of Veterans Affairs began acknowledging combat stress as a diagnosable condition. His speeches were quoted in hearings without attribution. His warnings proved accurate. Hollywood remembered him sporadically. Reruns of To Hell and Back aired on Memorial Day. Younger actors cited him as the real thing. But among soldiers, his name carried a different weight. In Fort Benning classrooms, instructors still referenced the Murphy ratio, one man's potential effect on unit morale under extreme stress. The term was unofficial but persistent. At the National Infantry Museum, a display case holds his M1 rifle, field knife, and a faded campaign map of northern France. Visitors stop, read the label, move on. The artifacts are small, almost ordinary. That was the point. He was never extraordinary in appearance, only in output. 50 years later, data historians recalculated the Allied casualty index for 1943-45. The statistical chance of surviving Murphy's cumulative engagements, North Africa, Sicily, Anzio, southern France, Holtzwihr, was 2.1%. The chance of doing so without psychological collapse? Unknown. He never asked to be remembered. His life measured success by precision, endurance, and refusal. When people called him fearless, they missed the truth. He was afraid every time. He just acted anyway. Audie. Murphy proved that courage isn't strength, it's survival with open eyes.